Hi! Before we start, I just want to say a quick thanks to Margbot for helping me out with this video. If you enjoy her narrations and you've never heard her before, there's a link to her channel at the end of the video and in the video description, so please go and check her out. She's a great narrator. And without further ado, here's the video. There is an old East Anglian legend that tells of this spectral hound. The large black dog roams the countryside in silence. He has red eyes, bared teeth, and a howl that will make your blood run cold. Death is said to follow a sighting. This beast is known as Black Shuck. He is sighted on the Norfolk and Suffolk coastline, and is known across the counties of Norfolk, Suffolk and Cambridgeshire. Two very famous incidents occurred in the 16th century hours apart. It was Sunday, August the 4th, 1577, and a powerful thunderstorm raged. Lightning, hail, thunder, rain, darkness. It was terrifying. The people of Bungay in Suffolk were knelt in prayer, sheltering in St Mary's Church, when a hellhound appeared in their midst and began tearing the congregation apart. Some people were killed. Suddenly, as he had appeared, Black Shuck departed. But his work was not yet done. He invaded a service 12 miles away at the Holy Trinity Church in Blytheborough. More people died, and scorch marks were left on the church door by the dog, which remain visible to this day. Now both of these churches are a few miles away from the remains of Leiston Abbey, which was in use from about the 14th century to the 16th. In recent years, the bones of a massive male dog have been unearthed in what was once the Abbey kitchen. The remains are currently undergoing radiocarbon dating, but experts believe they could date back to when the Abbey was in use. Compelling evidence that the Black Shuck is more than fiction, or coincidence. There's a link to a news article about this in the video description for anyone who's interested. This legend is so well known, you have probably already heard it. Known alternately as the Vanishing Hitchhiker or the Phantom Hitchhiker. The accounts vary, but always involve somebody getting a lift before disappearing mysteriously at some point down the road. One example revolves around the earthquake and tsunami that occurred in Japan in 2011. Parts of Japan were devastated and many people died. Afterwards, taxi drivers in Ishinomaki began reporting that they had been picking up ghostly fares. One well-known account tells of this woman who gave her destination as a place in one of the areas that was decimated. When the driver asked if she was sure, mentioning the level of destruction, the woman asked if she was dead, before vanishing into thin air. There are many ghostly tales about the Acle Strait in Norfolk. Drivers have reported a person stepping out in front of them, and when they hit the brakes, either the car passes right through the person, or they stop in time, only for there to be nobody else around. Others have seen a horse and cart pass across the road right in front of their vehicle. There are also vanishing hitchhiker legends about this area. The story goes that a young man is driving at night, maybe in bad weather, when he comes upon a woman at the side of the road. He opens his door and offers her a lift. When she gets in, he notices she's in a bad state, wet from the rain, dishevelled and a bit cut up. The young woman says her car ran off the road into a ditch, and she began walking when no helper came past. The man offers her his university hoodie off the back seat, which she wraps around herself. After they've been driving for a time, she points down the road and says her house is not far. He offers to drive her right up to the front door, but when he stops the car, she quickly gets out and is off up the lane in no time. The next day, the young man drops by the house to ask after her, and finds out that the woman he picked up had in fact died in a car accident many years previously. In a final twist, when he passes the local cemetery, he spots a sweater draped over one of the graves. Upon closer investigation, he discovers it to be his, the one he gave the woman last night. and the grave it's draped over is that of a young woman who died in an accident many years ago. For anybody interested, there's a link to a relevant newspaper article in the video description.
This legend tells of a British leader who battled the Saxons. He lived in Camelot Castle with wife Guinevere, a group of knights, and his close friend Merlin, the wizard, at his side. The stories also tell of Morgan Le Fay, who was probably the most well-known foe of King Arthur. She was a powerful enchantress and possibly the mother of Arthur's betrayer, Mordred. In the summer of 2016, archaeologists discovered the remains of an ancient royal palace at Tintagel in Cornwall, which dates back to the 5th and 6th centuries. The ruins which still stand at Tintagel today are from a later medieval castle built in the 13th century. Archaeologists have uncovered huge meter-thick masonry walls, steps, good quality slate, flagstone flooring, and scores of pottery and glass fragments. Amongst those fragments is proof the residents ate from fine imported plates and bowls, as well as drinking from beautiful imported glass cups. This crockery and their wine and olive oil were imported from places across the ancient Mediterranean. Some of the buildings that were a part of this palace complex were relatively large, so whoever lived here was clearly of high status. Tintagel, of course, features in Arthurian legend as the place of his conception. Another place that features in Arthurian legend is Avalon. This is the place where the sword Excalibur was said to have been forged, and also the place Arthur came to recover after a battle. It is also possibly the place where he passed away. Now, the name Avalon means the Isle of the Fruit Trees. In ancient times, what we know today as Glastonbury was then called the Isle of Avalon, and funnily enough, apple trees were in abundance. The area was also completely surrounded by marshland. Avalon is also significant because in the late 12th century, the monks of Glastonbury Abbey discovered a massive tree trunk coffin with a leaden cross buried within the abbey grounds. Latin script engraved on the cross essentially translates as "Here lies a glorious King Arthur of Avalon." Inside the coffin were the bones of a huge man who had injuries to the head and those of a woman assumed to be his wife Guinevere. The monks displayed the cross for some time, but of course the legend wouldn't be what it is had these finds not been lost in time, as nobody knows where the cross, coffin, and bones are today. Silchester in Hampshire was known as Caleva in ancient times and is said to be where King Arthur was coronated. This was an Iron Age turned Roman settlement and probably heavily fortified. Old Silchester was abandoned between the 5th and 7th centuries and never occupied by the Saxons. Cadbury Castle in Somerset could be the legendary Camelot. According to old accounts of the time, it was then known as Camelot. This Iron Age fort was occupied and defended by the Romans during their time in Britain. Archaeological work has revealed the existence of a substantial great hall on the site, and that the defenses had been refortified at some point. This made Camelot a defendable site double the size of any other known fort of the period. Pottery found indicates the residents had wide-reaching trade links with the Mediterranean. If Arthur existed, it's possible he used this site as an eastern front. There is so much possible proof of King Arthur's existence it's hard to argue he is merely a figment of somebody's imagination, but I'll leave the final verdict up to you. Relevant article links are in the video description.
The story goes like this. A lone woman is driving home at night. At some point along the way, she stops the car and gets out. Depending on which version of this legend you are listening to, this could be for any one of several reasons. Let's say she makes a quick toilet stop and doesn't lock the car. For much of the journey after this, she is tailgated by a car. The driver frequently flashes their high beams, dazzling her in the mirrors, and beeps the horn. The woman becomes terrified for her life and is convinced the driver behind her is a madman trying to run her off the road. It reaches the point her nerves are sufficiently frayed that she pulls over at the side of the road. To her dismay, the other driver also stops. He rushes to her car and tries to talk her into getting out. I'm sure many of you will have heard this urban legend before, and know that at this point the woman learns there is somebody lurking in her backseat who has been attempting to do her harm, and that is why the driver behind has appeared to be so crazy.
This story tells of a heroic outlaw who lived in Sherwood Forest, Nottinghamshire, with a group of men. They stole from the rich, gave to the poor, and lived on the outskirts of civilization, hunted by the Sheriff of Nottingham. You may well be familiar with the legend of Robin Hood. Stories regarding Robin Hood have been found that date back to maybe the 14th century at the earliest. Proof more solid than this is not known to exist. However, in early stories he is given the traditional green clothing, a sword, the men, and skill as an archer, as well as special regard for women, strong dislike for the Sheriff of Nottingham, pretty much the whole shebang. The real Robin Hood is likely to have resided in Yorkshire rather than Nottingham. Since his alleged birthplace is Loxley, this makes more sense, since Loxley is near Sheffield, South Yorkshire. Wentbridge in West Yorkshire is mentioned or alluded to in early stories about him. There is a place, the Church of St. Mary Magdalene at Campsall in South Yorkshire, which is associated with Robin Hood. Local legend seems to say that Robin Hood and Maid Marian were married at this church. It is said a prioress was caring for him at the time of his death, for he had been unwell for some time beforehand. She is said to have buried Robin beside the road he used to rob people on, in the hope of making people feel more comfortable about traveling that route again. The road ran from Wentbridge to Kirkby. Today, Kirkby is known as Pontefract. There is a church situated on that road a few miles from where his robberies are said to have taken place. This church used to have a hospital attached to it. These places are in West Yorkshire, so they fit the geography of Robin Hood. The real identity of this Robin Hood is still open to debate, as the name we know him by is likely a nickname, attributed because of his criminal endeavors. In medieval English, the name Robin Hood has various old spellings that essentially mean the same thing. He could have been a Robert Hood, or just as possibly some other name that had no similarity to the nickname. I think there is little doubt that the stories have at least some basis in fact, but the stories are all we have left of this man.
There is a lake in the Highlands of Scotland in which a mysterious creature is said to live. It is rarely seen, possibly a plesiosaur or something resembling one. Plesiosaurs were dinosaurs which lived in the oceans, dying out around 66 million years ago when an extinction-level event wiped out about 3/4 of the plant and animal species on the planet. The Loch Ness Monster is legendary. In July 1933, a couple are said to have seen a large, strange creature cross the road in front of their car and lurch towards the loch. It had a large body, long neck, and no limbs that they could see. The man referred to the creature as a dragon or prehistoric animal. This account seems to be where recent documented sites spring from. When this story appeared in the newspaper, readers sent in letters reporting sightings of a monster fish or sea serpent or dragon. In November 1933, a photograph was taken on the loch, said to be of the monster. The photo was slightly blurred and could simply show the man's dog, or an otter. I guess it's up to interpretation. But the original negative has been lost. In January 1934, a man claims to have almost run over the creature with his motorbike near the loch. It was night time. He said he followed it back to the loch, but only saw ripples on the water. The man described it as a cross between a seal and a plesiosaur. Later in 1934, a surgeon took a series of 4 photographs alleging to show the Loch Ness Monster. 2 of the photos didn't come out, and a third was blurry. The 4th became famous after it was printed in a newspaper. However, this sighting has been proven to be a hoax. In December 1954, the crew of a fishing boat took sonar readings in the loch. They noticed that a large object was keeping pace with their boat at depth. It followed them for a distance before sonar contact was lost and then regained. Previous attempts were inconclusive or negative. During a trial of some prototype sonar equipment in August 1967 on the loch, multiple targets were identified. One was probably a group of fish, but others moved at speeds of up to 10 knots in ways not characteristic of fish shoals. In 1972, some researchers performed sonar examinations of the depths of Loch Ness. One sighting of note was a moving target several metres long with something protruding from it, which could have been a very flexible flanned tail, or two animals swimming together, and the data was misinterpreted. A pair of underwater photographs were taken which supposedly show a flipper captured in different positions, suggesting movement. However, the original photos were altered, allegedly to enhance them, and nobody knows how exactly they were altered. So take from that what you will. Another sonar reading indicated two objects many metres in size. A photograph showed two large white lumpy objects surrounded by a ton of bubbles. This has been taken to show two plesiosaurish creatures, so perhaps several of these animals lived in the loch. This photo has rarely been published. In 1987, further sonar research was conducted on Loch Ness. The results indicated contact with an unknown creature of unusual size. Images taken indicated debris at the bottom of the loch, but there was motion in some of the pictures. The movement could have been seals which had entered the loch. However, a large object moving at depth appeared on the sonar at one point. There could be an undiscovered creature down there. In 2001, researchers filmed a V-shaped wake crossing the loch on a calm day. They also filmed something resembling a carcass on the loch floor and found marine clamshells, along with an organism not usually found in freshwater loch. In 2008, it was theorised the creature might have become extinct, since there has been a lack of sonar readings and a decline in sightings. It is thought the creatures might not have been able to adapt to the changes occurring because of climate change. So what do you think? Is the Loch Ness monster real? Whether or not it ever existed, the stories have ensured it will live on in legend.